Hey Fish Fam, it's Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and I'd love to go over today a comprehensive deck tech of Pioneer Merfolk. Pioneer Merfolk is at the bottom of the metagame. Everyone's counted it out, but I see potential there, and I just recently top 8'd a Pioneer challenge with this deck list. I've been improving it incrementally over the last month, and I'd love to share everything, all my findings with you. So I'm going to let you know why the cards I'm playing in this deck, what their purpose is, why I think it is good in the metagame right now. I'll also share the cards I think are terrible in the metagame, why Merfolk in Pioneer was struggling, and also I'll share with you what my opinions of the matchups, like how good or bad I think you should be in any particular matchup. And overall, I think Merfolk has game versus almost everything. I mean, aside from like mono red prowess, which I'm most fearful of, I think we have game versus everything. I can beat every other deck, and we have some amazingly good matchups. So let's start getting into the deck tech. We'll start with the meat and potatoes. When they unbanned Smuggler's Copter, that was a huge boost to this archetype. Why? When I played Pioneer when it first came out, and frankly, Merfolk's biggest problem was that it couldn't get in damage. Like, we don't have Island Walk Lords in this format. We have nothing that's basically unblockable. But do you know what? Smuggler's Copter is that answer to that problem. So if the board is really gummed up on the ground, you can easily fly over in the air for incremental amounts of damage. My favorite play on turn 2 is just slam a Copter and then start attacking, and it filters your lands into good stuff. It filters maybe situational cards like Mistcaller or Spell Pierce or Eaten by Piranhas. So we get to main deck some powerful cards in the main, but if they are not matching the matchup, if they don't connect properly, we can always filter them away with Smuggler's Copter. It's very easy to crew, and not to mention, it actually is a combo with our Deep-Root Pilgrimage. Deep-Root Pilgrimage is a blue 1 generic enchantment. Whenever one or more non-token Merfolk you control become tapped, create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token with hexproof. Deep-Root Pilgrimage is it's good versus any mid-range deck, especially the black mid-range decks that have not infinite amounts of removal, but a good chunk of removal. And obviously they can't target everything with Deep-Root Pilgrimage. It's good versus the control decks, and I think it's also very good in the creature matchups, giving you some ability to gum up the ground with a bunch of tokens and potentially counterattack for a bunch. So Deep-Root Pilgrimage has a very good synergy with the Smuggler's Copter, because for every creature that you crew, the creature will be tapped, therefore triggering Deep-Root Pilgrimage, which means for every Merfolk that's on the battlefield, you get a token. So you can crew the Smuggler's Copter millions of times. And by the way, I recommend that if you're up against a removal heavy deck, if their shields are down, probably you should just crew it while they're like crew. I find that I crew the Smuggler's Copter over and over and over again while my opponent's removal is down, because if they kill the Copter, well, combo broken, basically. But yeah, I am a huge fan of the Copter in this list. Deep-Root Pilgrimage, a little bit weaker in Modern because removal is a lot heavier, and so there is the risk that you have a Deep-Root Pilgrimage on the battlefield and there's no creatures to tap. You just can't get you can't tap a creature. It's like, it's impossible. Okay, you play a creature, they remove it. Well, then your Deep-Root Pilgrimage is like almost like card disadvantage. But in this format, in Pioneer, your creatures are much more likely to stick. Not to mention, we can play with the 4 full Mutavault. We do have that synergy with Copter. We also sometimes have synergy with Kumena, Tyrant of Vraska. We'll get around to that later. But I believe that in Pioneer, there is more potential for Deep-Root Pilgrimage, both for flooding the board and having synergy with the rest of the cards in our deck, both with Copter and Kumena, Tyrant of Vraska, which we might as well just move to right now. So we talked about how it's really hard to deal damage to the opponent because we don't have Island Walk Lords. Well, Kumena, Tyrant of Vraska is one of the answers to that. For 3 mana, it's a 2/4 Merfolk Shaman. Tap another untapped Merfolk you control. Kumena, Tyrant of Vraska can't be blocked this turn. So you can incrementally start swinging for damage with your Kumena while still making triggers with Deep-Root Pilgrimage. Oh, it's a beautiful combo when you have these two out, because you first tap a Merfolk to give it unblockable. Make a token, attack with Kumena, make a token, and then maybe with all those extra tokens, you can start tapping them and drawing cards. This engine is very strong. Here's the thing about Pioneer Merfolk that we don't have in Modern. In Modern, if your board is empty, you're not like coming back out of nowhere. But in Pioneer, you can. With just one random creature on the battlefield, Deeproot Pilgrimage and Cometa Tyrant of Araska, in 3 turns, you can completely overwhelm an army from your opponent. It's actually insane. You like tap, make a token, attack, make a token, then start tapping tokens, draw a card, play 2 more Merfolk, tap them, make more tokens, and then be on blocking duty. Because there's 2 other abilities. You can tap 3 untap Merfolk you control, draw a card. Ideally, remember, Deeproot Pilgrimage doesn't trigger upon tokens that it makes. It has to be non-token creatures. So ideally, when you're drawing cards, always tap 2 tokens and 1 non-token Merfolk. That maximizes how many cards you can draw and the tokens that you make at the same time. Don't be tapping like 3... I mean, if you have the option, don't tap 3 non-token Merfolk. So you can draw cards, but a very underestimated ability. It's like a pseudo lord. Tap 5 untap Merfolk you control to put a +1/+1 counter on each Merfolk you control. It took me a while to realize that ability is actually really powerful, and I should be aiming to tap 5 creatures to pump. If I have 5 creatures on the battlefield, I should probably pump everything up to get ready to swing and try to close out the game. Probably I'm in a position, if I have that many tokens on the board, to do that, and I should probably just stop drawing cards. Anyway, it's always up to the situation. So Cometa Tyrant of Araska, great value, great combo with Pilgrimage, unblockable damage. One of the I want to say like this is a new card that I'm springing up, but this didn't really become stock to Merfolk. Sentinel of the Nameless City. Now, it's a green 2 generic 3/4 Merfolk Warrior Scout. It's got vigilance. Now, whenever Sentinel of the Nameless City enters the battlefield or attacks, create a map token. So a map is just an artifact. You pay 1, sack it, and target creature explores. You can draw a land or you can buff it up. That's very, very important. So it can either be card advantage that you can like throw away to your copter. So, I mean, you don't mind drawing lands. Oh, I draw a land. All right, I'm just going to feed it to the copter and actually get fresh cards. Alternatively, buffing your creatures up is incredibly strategically relevant because your opponent's creatures might max out on a certain toughness. Like if the biggest creature your opponent has 4 toughness, just put an Explore counter on Sentinel of the Nameless City, and boom, once it's a 4/5, it can attack through everything. And frankly, a 4/5 creature attacks or overwhelms 95% of the creatures in this format, all right? A 4/5 creature is basically the boss of Pioneer. So that is why I really like the stats on Sentinel of the Nameless City. It's a 3/4, which pumped up is just overwhelming. Now, not only that, it's got vigilance. And this is very important. I am not playing with Merfolk Trickster or Harbinger of the Tides. The reason we play with those cards in like Modern is to stall the opponent so that we can catch up and turn the corner. But in my opinion, those cards are very bad at doing that in Pioneer. It's like a speed bump for a second, but really they're still at the end of the day 2/2 creatures, and a lot of what people are doing in Pioneer just completely overwhelms you. That is not the case with Sentinel of the Nameless City. You slam this 3/4 on the battlefield, it basically puts a ton of the format, just stops them in their tracks. They try to kill this thing at first sight. Because I can now attack you, you take damage, and I'm still on blocking duty. It's beautiful. And every single time you attack, you keep getting these map tokens. So it's like the Sveilun of this format, a Sveilun of Sea and Sky for this format. Not to mention, I should actually reiterate, a lot of the removal in Pioneer is for 3 toughness creatures. This is one of the main selling points of Sentinel of the Nameless City, is that it's got 4 toughness. So it dodges most of the removal in the format, which is also another reason why I want to max out on Cometa, Tyrant of Araska. Being at 4 toughness dodges a ton of the removal, whether it be Fiery Impulse or so on. So you've got that. Also, having a bunch of 3-drops in the deck, like Cometa Tyrant of Araska, Sentinel of the Nameless City, Brazen Borrower, or like some other 3-drop, even Tishana's Tidebinder is not too bad. Gets around, what is it called? the Path of Peril is a very common black sweeper that you'll see in every black mid-range deck. It's 4 mana, destroy all creatures with mana value 2 or less. So having more 3-drops in your deck versus those black mid-range decks, whether it be Vampires, Waste Not, Rakdos mid-range, Mono Black mid-range, Golgari mid-range, whatever, they cannot touch these things with their sweepers. They'll get very bad value. I mean, sometimes I have like Smuggler's Copter, Deep-Root Pilgrimage. I've got a 3-drop in play, and all they can do with their Path of Peril is kill like a Kamena Speaker. It's beautiful. The way that the Merfolk deck really chokes and puts a stranglehold on the mid-range deck's removal spells. Now, it's important to note, because it has Vigilance, it doesn't tap, which means it doesn't trigger the Deep-Root Pilgrimage, but you can still tap it after the fact to crew the Copter. Also, a cute little trick you can do with Kamena Tyrant of Razka and Sentinel of the Nameless City is attack with both. So you attack with Vigilance here, you tap the Kamena, and then holding priority before you let your opponent go to blocks, tap the Sentinel of the Nameless City to give Kamena Tyrant of Razka unblockable, and that's a way you can sneak in damage, but also it's another way of triggering the Deep-Root Pilgrimage at the same time. So I think Sentinel of the Nameless City is a fantastic card versus basically a lot of the aggro decks. Like this is, you see those Convoke decks, the Humans decks, any sort of, like, most of the aggro decks. Turns out this card is like awkward versus Prowess because all their pump spells can, like, if they have Soulscar Mage, they can just burn this thing with Wizard's Lightning and it just shrinks and it's not that relevant. But versus everything else, I think the Sentinel is amazing. Really top quality value engine and creature. Okay, let's start going down to the 1-drops. We got Mistcaller, we got Cenote Scout, we also have Kamena Speaker. And one of the advantages of Pioneer Merfolk is its mana efficiency. A lot of the decks in Pioneer are like, I mean, Pioneer comes down to like 2 classes. You're either like super mana efficient, like the Convoke decks, or the Prowess deck. Is it Phoenix? So you're like, you can rattle off a bunch of spells, or per turn, or you're really clunky. You can only play like 1 spell a turn, like Niv to Light, or a lot of the mono black or the black mid-range decks, like Vampires. You're playing like 1 spell a turn. Passing the turn on turn 1 sort of sucks, but Merfolk is not that type of deck. We're super mana efficient. We got a lot of things we can do at 1 mana. We have Kamena Speaker, which is a 1 mana, basically a 1 mana 2/2. Cenote Scout, which can be card advantage. You enter the battlefield, it explores, so either it's a 2/2 and you sculpt the top of your library, which I love, or you draw a land off of it. Not too bad. Mistcaller. No, Mistcaller, honestly, it's not good in a whole lot of matchups in the overall Pioneer metagame, but it's very good versus very few matchups, but they're very popular. So like, it's got game versus Is It Phoenix, because you stall them on their Phoenixes. Now sure, they can burn it in advance, but they can't go for the Phoenix play that turn. So basically, like, even if they play Fiery Impulse here, they basically lost a card, and they have to go for the Phoenix next turn. So that soaked up one of the spells that they would have played that turn. But Mistcaller has game versus Amalia, the Amalia combo. They play Court of Calling, they play Extraction Specialist, they play Return to the I think some sort of Return to the Ranks card. They've got Collected Company, so beautiful card in that matchup. Also tough matchup, but more evened out because of Mistcaller. Also, thing is, I'm not sure, maybe as game versus the Prowess deck, because they've got that 1 mana enchantment that will turn into a creature. Kumano, Faces of Kakazan. So on the 3rd chapter, you have to exile and it comes into play as a 2/2. I actually think it would be worth it to just sack the Mistcaller to get rid of that creature, so their creature count is low. So in the end, the enchantment, basically, it pinged you for 1, it buffed 1 creature, but maybe your Mistcaller had some influence on the board in the meantime. So it can interact there. It has some interaction versus the mono green Nykthos deck. Not like the greatest interaction, but interaction nonetheless, because they have the card Storm the Festival. So Storm the Festival can put like 5 mana cards onto the battlefield, but it's gotta be non-creature cards. You limit them to the non-creature cards. So maybe they have a Cure in play. You have to force them to put another Cure in play. So Mistcaller is sort of a cute card, while being a 1-drop. And by the way, I do side it out pretty often, but nonetheless, it helps crew the Copter, synergy with Pilgrimage, synergy with Commander Tyrant of Razka. Can be randomly sacked a Hexcatcher, no problem there. 2 Spell Pierces in the main. I don't feel too strongly about this. I just like having some counter spells in the main. Lets me sleep at night. I mean, even versus the Thoughtseize decks in the format, even if they see Spell Pierce in my hand, they usually cannot even do anything about it because the removal and their cards are so clunky. Like it's gonna eat a Sorin, it's gonna eat a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. It's hard for them to hold up the 2 mana and stall the game out to make me waste this thing, or they try to use a removal spell on a creature and I get to snag something with my Spell Pierce. Next up, let's talk about Vidalian Hexcatcher. Vidalian Hexcatcher, just an all-around very good card. There's a lot less punishment to 1 toughness creatures in Pioneer. Just basically the Rakdos Sacrifice deck might do that, but everything else is like pretty fair game. So Hexcatcher is actually quite strong in the format, buffing your team of random garbage on the battlefield, including the Pilgrimage, but also being able to sacrifice any random fodder on the battlefield, whether it be Mistcaller or Deeproot Pilgrimage tokens, to keep control of the game versus the mid-range decks, the control decks, the combo decks. Not to mention, there's some decks like where if you have Deeproot Pilgrimage out and like either Copter or Kumena and then Vidalian Hexcatcher, I mean, it's just a lock. You just make like 4 tokens a turn. I've been in games where I sacrificed 6 tokens a turn just to counter a removal spell because I knew it was worth it, because my opponent can't win so long as I have like this many creatures on the battlefield and I'm making this many tokens per turn. So like anyway, so that, I mean, that's the advantage there. And it's pretty useful in almost every single matchup. Or I should say every matchup. I don't think I side it out at all. Brazen Bar, this is a flex slot. I have like a 2x flex slot here. I've tried Deeproot, Deeproot Wayfinder. I've tried Merfolk Mistbinder. I'm obviously trying Brazen Bar. I've played Tashanda's Tidebinder. Don't feel strongly about particularly any card, but because my worst matchup is Prowess, I'm trying to experiment with playing more at flash speed, and also if they played Monstrous Rage, I think it was Monstrous Rage, to give the creature that roll token, that give it trample, I can at least reset it by playing Petty Theft so I can start chump blocking. Because you would think, oh, you make millions of tokens, that should block Prowess, right? Wrong. It absolutely does not, because they just give their creatures trample and they trample over, and it's really frustrating. So if they want to go for a big pump up on one turn, I can bounce their creatures or at least reset the roll tokens, or if they put Audacity on a creature to give it trample. So if it has trample, I can bounce it and give myself some opportunity to block it. Also, the creature afterwards can block a Slick Shot Showdown, which normally we don't do very well at blocking things. Also, Smuggler's Copter I don't think is very good in the Prowess matchup. So yeah, Brazen Borrower. This is just a flex slot. I do not know if this will stand the test of time. It's just there for now. Eaten by Piranhas and Witness Protection. These are called the frog effects because both of them will turn the opponent's creature into a 1/1 frog with no abilities. The same as Turn to Frog, which was like a 2-mana spell, like turn a creature into a 1/1 frog with no abilities. This is one of the missing pieces of tech from Pioneer Merfolk that requires it to beat the black mid-range decks. Every single one of their cards like completely outclasses us in the black mid-range decks. Let me look up like in Rakdos Vampires. If the opponent resolves Shieldred, if they resolve Vein Ripper, you cannot beat it. Nobody can. Like you can't tap it down with Merfolk Trickster and expect to really get away with that. We don't have a Dismember in the format. We have like no way to deal with these creatures, or we only deal with them in a really poor way. What else is there's like Kalitas, Shieldred, Vein Ripper. There's some other creatures though. Archfiend of the Dross, Graveyard Trespasser sucks. There's like a flying lifelink 4/3 or 5/3 or something like that. Anyway, all those cards destroy you unless you have the frog effects, and I recommend you have at 6. You have to have 6 frog effects. Eaten by Piranhas is a flash one, by the way. Flash, enchant creature loses all abilities and is a black skeleton with power and toughness 1/1. Witness Protection is an enchant creature. Enchant creature loses all abilities and is a green and white citizen creature token with base power and toughness 1/1. So this one's sorcery speed, but it's 1 mana. This one's at flash speed, but it's 2 mana. Now, they're not all the same. Now, I'm leaning a little heavier on the Eaten by Piranhas right now because there's a lot of Amalia in the format, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe you want more Witness Protection. They're not equal. Witness Protection has an advantage versus some of the like more aggro decks. I would say like even against Mono Green Nykthos. So if they play turn 1 Mana Dork and you're on the draw, well, I mean, Eaten by Piranhas is useless. You would much rather have Witness Protection on the play and on the draw, by the way. So on the play, I can play Commander Speaker. They go Mana Dork, turn 2. I can play Cenote Scout and like and Witness Protection at the same time. So that's a nice thing about this deck is that because we are so full of 1-drops, we have the option to go like 1-drop, 2-drop, and then maybe play 2. Like a 2-drop and a 1-drop on turn 3 or 2 1-drops on turn 2. We've got a lot of flexibility. We don't have to tap out every single turn. So Witness Protection is good versus aggro decks, good versus like even Scissor decks. They go Ensoul Artifact. You Witness Protection it, they lose the Ensoul Artifact, and whatever their creature is just a 1/1. But also very, very important for beating all the mono black mid-range decks. But against the mid-range decks, it doesn't matter which one you play. They're both. I mean, technically, Eaten by Piranhas is probably better because their better creatures are higher up on the curve. You can hold it up at flash speed. But I think Witness Protection is probably a little bit better versus is it Phoenix, Mono Green Nykthos? I don't want to say for sure prowess decks because Eaten by Piranhas has an advantage versus Slick Shot. They play Slick Shot and then you can Eaten by Piranhas instead of letting them attack. Sometimes they plot it versus me when they know I have mana up, so they plot their Slick Shot, then they wait till their turn, then they cast it with a bunch of mana up because they can still like pump up the creature by a ton, and even if you play Eaten by Piranhas, like it can still trample over for like 1 billion damage. What else do we have here? So anyway, this is quintessential to beating the black mid-range decks across the format. Make sure you've got 6 of them in your 75. I don't care where you put them, and I don't care about what combinations. You can have 4 Witness Protection, 2 Eaten by Piranhas. You can have it 3/3, and I'm probably going to move between those depending, how I feel for the day. Next, we have some standard counterspells. Disdainful Stroke. This is good versus every control deck and combo deck. They always have something that's 4 mana or higher, and they're all super high impact cards. Counter target spell with mana value 4 or greater. Next up, we've got Mystical Dispute, which is 3 mana. Spell costs 2 less to cast if it targets a blue spell. Which you're going to be bringing them in versus decks that have blue spells. You're also going to bring it in versus combo decks that don't have blue spells because paying 3 mana for a mana leak is totally fine as well. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. It is useful versus Is It Phoenix, but it's super good versus Niv-to-Light because if they're on the play and they got their Mana Dork out on turn 2, and they're ready to play Omnath by turn 3. It is very convenient to be able to like tap out and play Smuggler's Copter on turn 3 and hold up 1 mana, so I can be ready for their Omnath on their turn 4. So I really like Mystical Dispute for that reason. While it like nails all the powerful cards, whether it be Omnath or Bring to Light or a Niv Mizzet. So it just hits everything. Arguably, there could be like 3 to 4 of these in the sideboard. My last counterspell is Decisive Denial. Choose one target creature you control fights, target creature you don't control. You can bring this in versus certain creature matchups. I like bringing it in versus Amalia. There is some chance you can just fight an Amalia or fight a bat or just fight something on the battlefield that interacts with them, while also being a counterspell versus Blue-Eye Control, combo decks, etc. And then next we've got... So I'm Tidebinder Mage. I don't know how good this card is going to be. I currently have 4 in the sideboard because Mono Red Prowess is a terrible matchup. It is like all the Slick Shot decks are just terrible. It's so bad. I'm almost I don't know if I've ever beaten him once with this build. I don't know, maybe once out of luck. But anyway, it's a very, very terrible matchup. So I'm trying to shore it up with things like Tidebinder Mage. When it enters the battlefield, tap target red or green creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Tidebinder Mage. It's not a completely useless creature either. You can bring this in versus the Nykthos ramp decks because you can, on the play, tapping their Mana Dork, that is huge. That is just huge. And not to mention, like, they can't interact. I don't think they can interact with it very well, period, anyway. It also is... Honestly, I'd bring it in versus Merfolk. Oh, we got a lot of green creatures here. This is Commander Speaker, Cenote Scout, Sentinel, the Commander Tyrant of Razak. It would work perfectly. So you can bring it in. It's good in the mirror. There's probably going to be more mirror matches coming in the future. Lastly, Torpor Orb, not a very flexible piece of interaction, but hits Amalia really hard. And Amalia should technically be a bad matchup, but between Torpor Orb and Mistcaller and Olar Frog effects, it's actually not too bad. It's actually really tolerable. And actually, Torpor Orb hits them super, super hard. Like, it just shuts down tons of their synergy. Like, they're no longer gaining life. They're no longer triggering anything, and you force that. Even if they have the combo on the battlefield, you'll force them to have force them to gain life through an attack in order to trigger it. But it's a huge beating to their deck. They do have answers to it, like they have Boseiju and a bunch of other stuff, but still, I mean, you force them to have that, and it buys you a lot of time to set up your own board and go in for an attack. Let's talk about the mana base a little bit. It's sort of important. I have tweaked and tinkered with this mana base. Like, the general rule of thumb is that you need to have, like, 14 sources of a card in a deck to reliably cast something on turn 1, like 90% of the time. I want that to be closer to 100%. So I don't want 14 sources to cast my Cenote Scout and Commander Speaker, and maybe I'm being too greedy. Maybe I am, but I do not want to mulligan or be choked on mana just once with this deck. I hate that. So that is why I am playing with 16 blue sources and 16 green sources. All right, I've counted it up. That's why we got a Yavin Coast over here, so I can cast my Spell Pierce and my Witness Protection on turn 1. So we got like 4, 8, 12, 14, 15, 16 blue sources, so I can cast my like Witness Protection and have Spell Pierce available turn 1. And now, additionally, for our green cards like Cenote Scout and Commander Speaker, I should also have 14. We got 4, 8, 12, 15, 16. Am I too crazy? You can let me know in the comment section below. But also, having a lot of blue sources is really important for Tidebinder Mage. If you play with any double blue creatures that you need to have in play by turn 2, you're supposed to have 21 sources of mana. Now, I'm being a little greedy here. This deck has 19. But we do have Cenote Scout, which is basically a cantrip. You have 4 cantrips in your deck. It is equal to 4 cantrips in your deck is equal to 1 land. So the Cenote Scout basically gives me 20 lands, which makes me feel a little comfortable playing with my Tidebinder Mage here. So that is why I don't have any Boseiju. I used to play with Boseiju. Boseiju is a great card in this deck. I think it has a lot of great targets. I think it's a fantastic card for your mana base, but I'm playing with a blue creature in my sideboard, so I don't want Boseiju to screw me up. And it's like, it's not mandatory. It's just nice. I think Boseiju is better than Otawara, but Otawara is more of a free roll for me, given that... well, anyway, I got my green, so I need my blue sources. I'll need my blue sources here for my baby. I need it for my baby. I also need blue sources for this baby, but I don't need it so badly for turn 2. I think turn 2 you can survive off of like 13, 14 blue sources. But that explains my mana base. I have 2 islands specifically because Field of Ruin and Desolation Field are super popular. You know, there's a lot of lands in this format, a lot of creature lands. There's Nykthos, so there's some decks, they're super heavy on like 8 fields. So sometimes you have your island, then they Field of Ruin you, so you make damn sure you have another island. And because this is not a Blood Moon format, you can't really be punished for having a bunch of non-basics. So like if you have a starting hand and you had like, I don't know, Botanical Sanctum, Cavern of Souls, Island, and you have to mulligan, you have to ship one of your lands back into your deck. It's usually like wise to try to ship the basic back just in case something has Field of Ruin, that you don't lose cards when they Field of Ruin you multiple times. Because I've definitely been, it's usually not that punishing for me, but I've definitely been in a situation where they like Field of Ruin Mutavault, I get an island. Field of Ruin Cavern of Souls, get an island. Field of Ruin one more time. All right, well, that's it, I guess. That's just, it's strip mine now. But usually it's not that big of a deal. Anything else I want to say about this deck? Yeah, the 3 Cavern of Souls. So that explains the Yavimaya Coast, just so I can reliably cast actual blue cards out of this thing. Might also touch on Petty Theft for a Brazen Borrower. Just give me something more things to do on turn 2. I like the idea of being able to pass up with 2 mana, and I could play Hexcatcher. I could Petty Theft also gives me more room to sort of bounce a creature versus the black mid-range decks, and I just randomly have like a 3-mana flyer against most decks anyway. Okay, so these are all the cards that I'm playing right now. Let's start talking about cards I do not play, because they all, some of these cards are fine. Some of these cards have a big problem, and I don't like them. I don't like them at all. Let's start off. Let's just start from left to right. I don't have that big of a problem with Benthic Biomancer. Here, let's squeeze you in here, Benthic Biomancer. It's 1 mana 1/1. I just think it's worse than Cometa Speaker. Mistcaller is just better positioned, so I'd rather have Mistcaller in the format. Benthic Biomancer is okay. It's just squeezed out for other cards. Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Why, Nikachu, you're not playing with Agatha's Soul Cauldron? You can, like, basically reanimate Hexcatcher's ability on your creatures, or Mistcaller, and screw over Is It Prowess, or blah, 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 blah. So, Agatha's Soul Cauldron is a 2-mana legendary artifact. I'm not going to explain it. You probably already know what this card does. The point is, it's super clunky. Cards like Smuggler's Copter and Deeproot. Cards like. Let's get back to our deck. Backspace. Let's get back to our deck. Oop, everything's too big. Everything's still too big. Okay. Cards like Smuggler's Copter, Deeproot Pilgrimage, and Cometa Tyrant of Verazca, it can work off of very few resources. You only need one other creature on the battlefield, and basically the card works pretty well. Not the case with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I actually think the card is brutally terrible. If you have one creature on the battlefield, it's worthless. You need like 2 or more creatures on the battlefield. So it requires this gigantic density of creatures. And like when people are trying to explain oh yeah, you got these tokens, you got this creature on the battlefield, and you got this creature, and you got this creature, well then it's just win more. So whenever someone tries to explain a situation where Agatha's Soul Cauldron is good, they just have like a million creatures on the battlefield. If Agatha's Soul Cauldron was just another random good creature, you're still winning. It's just a super win more card. The only advantage to the Soul Cauldron is because it exiles cards from the graveyard. You have like, I think you have a good edge versus like Is It Phoenix, so that you force them to basically hardcast the Phoenix, but they can still hardcast the Phoenix. I mean, you have Soul Cauldron on the battlefield. What are they going to dump their Phoenix in the graveyard? No, they're just going to make their land drops and they'll attack you in the air. And it's not even like they waste that much time, because you wasted a turn to play the Soul Cauldron. So anyway, I don't like the card. I play tested it once, and I lost to a black mid-range deck, because I was just forcing it, and it was like, wow, that sucks. And I lost a game to Nivtala. It's like, okay, that's it. We're done with this card. I'm done. It works exactly as I thought in theory. The card is just super win more and trash. I understand there were like some combo versions of the deck that played this card. It's so convoluted to set up that you can just win with normal cards. Like if you have 4 or 5 permanents on the battlefield that's not being interacted with your opponent, you're going to win anyway, okay? It's okay. You don't need the Cauldron. Silvergill Adepts, completely pushed out of the format. Now, I would say I never have a problem with cards in my hand. Like, I always have stuff to do. I'm always exploring, drawing cards, looting them with Copter. I will always, if I lose any games, I usually lose because I still have cards in my hand. It was more because I was not mana efficient. I could not keep up with the power of my opponent's creatures. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. Silvergill Adept is like one of the worst things I could do on turn 2. It's a 2/1, which means it cannot attack into anything in this format. It also cannot block well at all. It's just a trash card that doesn't interact with the battlefield. Drawing a card is just not worth it anymore. I prefer to draw a card off of Cenote Scout, or later on in the game with something like Sentinel of the Nameless City, where I'm starting to explore. And honestly, just even exploring like permanents to the top of my deck is good enough. I don't need to physically draw them. So Silvergill Adept, in my opinion, is just super. It's like a huge tempo. It's a huge tempo loss, and the advantage of drawing a card is just meaningless, because I'm beating all the control and mid-range decks anyway. I would say we have a just amazing matchup versus any Thoughtseize deck, Nivtalite, or control deck. That is in the bag. We don't need this. Not at all. Harbinger of the Tides. The biggest problem is, like, very similar to Silvergill Adept. Like, a grizzly bear is not going to get the job done. You could bounce something, and then when they replay it, now what are you going to do? Okay, you bounce like an old growth troll or something. Okay, they replay it. Now what are you going to do? Because this is just a 2/2, and it's clunky as hell. It's heavy on blue mana. Like, I really like it when I play something like Hexcatcher plus Cenote Scout on the same turn. That's great. But, like, if you have... and I can do that with Mutavault mana. When I have Mutavault mana, I'm basically just going to be playing this, and then that's it. That is going to be my turn, and basically, if whatever I bounce, they're just going to replay it, and it gets completely outclassed later on. Things like Harbinger of the Tides and Merfolk Trickster basically have the same problem, in that it's a speed bump, but in the late game, you get overwhelmed because the creatures themselves are not that big, not that strong, and not interactive as the game goes further. That's why I like so much the Sentinel of the Nameless City. It's basically interacting with creatures the moment it enters the battlefield, the turn after that, the turn after that, and the turn after that. It's always on defense because it's got vigilance. And it's a big, beefy creature, and it can keep beefing up. It can beef itself up, and it can beef other creatures up. So anyway, that is why I am I'm not a fan of either of these cards. And one good thing about Trickster in Modern is that it can eat some creatures like Dragon Rage Chandler, Tarmogoyf, a Territorial Kavu. It eats nothing in this format. Just absolutely nothing. Is it anything? I think nothing. I don't think it can eat a single creature in this format. And because it can't do that, it's just a speed bump that is easily overwhelmed. Like, if you have a hand of like too many of these cards, you're just going to get crushed by basically the power level of the format. Deep-Root Elite, another pretty useless type of creature. I mean, it's literally just a 1/1 that buffs things up for 1, but I think a more impactful play on turn 2, right? Like, you want this thing out early, but the problem is that the better things to play early are going to be Smuggler's Copter, Hexcatcher, or Deep-Root Pilgrimage. So, like, the bar for what's being played on turn 2 is super high. I don't think this meets that bar. Don't like Deep-Root Pilgrimage. Merfolk Branchwalker, I have nothing too much against Merfolk Branchwalker. It's okay. Because paying a green 1 generic, you're either going to get a card out of it, but I think it much better is that it explores and you can put a +1/+1 counter on it. So being a 3/2, now it actually can reliably like block something or attack into things and at least threaten to trade. On top of that, it's just like one more explore away from being a 4-power creature, which now attacks into a ton more stuff into this format. That being said, I like, again, I think the bar is really high for what 2-drops I want to put in this deck. And some people... maybe I should go back to my deck for a second. I have 23 lands in the deck, and it's coming down from 24, but I was still pretty comfortable with 24. I think it's insane to have something like 20 to 21 lands in your deck. I think it's just bad. If you have less than 22 lands, I think you're crazy. I think you should have at least 22 lands. I think you should be at 23. Like I said, you do not want to be choked on mana with this deck at all. Your advantage is playing multiple spells a turn and competing with what other people are doing, or getting ahead by playing like a creature plus holding up Spell Pierce or something like that. You do not want to be in a position where you're just playing one thing a turn. But people will then go down to 20, 21 lands and then trick themselves into playing Branchwalker or playing... so that, like, hey, it's worth a land, right? Well, not really. If you do not have Branchwalker in your hand, then you're just going to be super choked on mana that game. And I mean, you still could be choked on mana even if you have Branchwalker, even if you do draw the Branchwalker. So don't trick yourself. Have at least 22. Ideally, I think you should have 23 lands in your deck in this format. Curious Follower, just a 2/2. So some people like the idea that you can ramp into stuff. I think it's just a bad idea. Curious Follower is basically... I've played it in Modern. I've played it in Pioneer. It's just too weak of a card. Like, as a random top deck, it's just bad. Like, these are all... It's very important to state that these are all bad top decks. Like, this can be a bad... This maybe is okay to... It's a bad top deck. You're basically cycling in the late game versus any deck. This is going to be completely outclassed. Like, if we get to turn 5 or 6, a 2/1 is worthless in this format. Because remember, we don't have Island Walk. You have to literally force the damage. This is not going to do the job. 2/2 is not going to do the job. 2/2 is not going to do the job. Like, it's got to have some very serious utility on the battlefield. for the card to matter, and Kiro's Follower sort of steps in that camp where, okay, you're gonna be waste your turn 2, so you can be like, I don't know, a little bit more mana efficient on your following turn, but you're still not really doing anything to the board. You're not attacking your opponent. I just don't find it's very interactive. Merfolk Mistbinder. A lot of people wonder why the hell is this excluded from the deck, and boy, do I have a good answer. And I played with this card a lot. A lot. So there's 2 answers to this. Now, first answer is, if you just try to lord out the game, like turn 1 creature, turn 2 Merfolk Mistbinder, turn 3 Mistbinder, turn 4 Hexcatcher, it will lose to almost everything. There is no way that strategy will work versus anything. Like, they'll path to peril you, they'll just kill your lords 1 turn at a time, you're just playing into everyone's game plan, or other people will just completely overwhelm you. It's not that fast of a plan. But lords are still good. So, but like on turn 2, the bar is set up so high for what I want to do on turn 2. I would rather play with Smuggler's Copter on turn 2 and start beating my opponent with evasive creatures. Because even if you get Merfolk Mistbinder out on turn 2, your opponent could still have like a 2-3 in play, and you can't even attack into them or something. Like there's still a lot of big creatures in the format that like outclass you. Are you going to attack with your 2-2? Well, maybe not. Or maybe you do, and like you realize, well, the block isn't even profitable, so you still can't even attack that turn. That's why I prefer starting with the Copter, turn 2, and then follow it up. And then once you start with the Copter, then you want to follow it up. Like, so we go back to the deck. You start with your Copter. All right, then what do you play? Well, next you want to play Deeper Pilgrimage. Okay, then what do you want to play? Well, then you want to play with something like Hexcatcher. Oh, this is the wrong deck. You want to play Hexcatcher because you want to start protecting versus, I don't know, board wipes or sweepers or something. So like, when's the time to play this card? When's the time to play Merfolk Mistbinder? Well, the answer is the time to play it is on turns like 4, 5, and 6. It's like super late in the game, and that's fine, except one problem. You're winning anyway. And that is the sole reason why Merfolk Mistbinder doesn't make the cut. So like, even while I was playing it, I played it with preparation to play it on turns 5, 6, 7, or turns 4, 5, and 6, with the point of making, like, you know, making a big swing, making some good use out of our pilgrimage tokens. So you make like a bunch of Deeproot pilgrimage tokens. All right, well, what are we going to do with it? Well, apparently the tokens by themselves are just good enough. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You do not need the Merfolk Mistbinder. It does not help you. If you are playing accurately, you're playing good. Like, the little dinky tokens on the battlefield are good enough as they are. Or you pump them up with Hexcatcher, or you pump them up with Tyrant of Vraska. This is basically a vanilla nothing. So that's why it got cut from the deck. It's not interactive. Like Hexcatcher, okay, it pumps up the team. Also controls the combo decks and the control decks, or protects your creatures from removal when your opponent's really tapped down. So Merfolk Mistbinder doesn't make the cut. Tishana's Tidebinder. The card's okay, to be honest. Like, it was my flex slot. I played in the sideboard. It has good moments. The biggest problem with Tishana's Tidebinder is a little win more. Like, against, like, it's good versus the combo decks. It's good versus the control decks. But we're doing well versus those decks anyway. And so the ETB, very good in those matchups. It does help versus Amalia. So that is one good matchup that... that's a good matchup that does not require... that I would say we could use some catching up to do to like get an edge. I would say the card's playable. If you want to play it as in your flex slot or in the sideboard, you've got my blessing. But I'm not playing it right now. And it just has the downside of being good in most matchups that we're good in. And I think 3 mana for a 3/2 sort of sucks. Like, again, like, it needs to be like a control deck that has no creatures in play. Like, there's no resistance, because this is not going to attack into anything. All right, by the time, once we get to turn 3, turn 4, your opponent's going to have something that can, like, trade with your Tishana's Tidebinder, and you probably don't want to do that. Like, you just don't want to do that. So when I have Kumena and Sentinel of the Nameless City, that's what I want to spend 3 mana on. And that's the type of power and toughness that I want to have in my deck when I'm spending 3 mana. Tishana's Tidebinder sort of doesn't get that job done on the ground when attacking. So it's more as like a 3 mana counterspell that incidentally can attack. But again, don't really need that help. But it's just like an okay card. It's not bad. It's not great. I might go back to it. Collected Company. Collected Company is fine. Well, so here's the deal. It's fine. if you build around it. Now, the deck that I have for you today is not fine because I do not have enough creatures, in my opinion, to make Collected Company work. So Collected Company is ideal when you have 28 creatures in your deck. I have 25, which means when you play Collected Company, you are at risk, a pretty good risk of just getting one creature off of it. How do you feel about spinning the wheel for 4 mana and getting 1 Cenote Scout? Well, I do not like the idea of that. Not to mention, getting to 4 lands is still rough. At 23 lands, you will reliably hit your 3rd land drop by turn 3, but you won't hit the 4th one. You might be stuck with Collected Company in your hand for quite a while, and in that time, the opponent can Thoughtseize it, or just disrupt it, or, I'm up against Spirits, and I have a stupid Mausoleum Wanderer out. That's so annoying. So the main reason I do not play Collected Company is I don't think I have a creature count to make that work. I have too many non-creatures like Smuggler's Copter and Deep Root Pilgrimage and Eaten by Piranhas and Spell Pierce in my main deck. And on top of that, I'm playing with just too many of these dinks. Like, I think it's more appropriate to have, 8 or something. Like, I would prefer to, lean heavier on bigger 3-drops that makes use of my Collected Company. I just don't think I have that. I've got, 4, 8, 12, 15. I got 15 good creatures to get with Collected Company. I don't mind getting Brazen Bar with Collected Company. It's a 3/1 flyer. That's not bad. But, this is all just garbage. And sometimes, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can play Collected Company at 25, 26 creatures and, a random garbage plus, Kamena, Tyrant of Vraska. Maybe that's not bad. Maybe I'm underestimating it. But that's why I'm not playing with Collected Company in this deck. I think, can you build a deck around Collected Company? Maybe. I did build one. I built one, and I beat 2 prowess decks with it. But I had to, Tidebinder Mage and Mindsinger and stuff like that. So it was built. It was a deck built for Collected Company. But also, if you up your curve, the deck just gets more clunky. So anyway, that's why I'm not playing with Collected Company. I'm not saying it's terrible, but that's why I'm not playing it, because I think my creature count is too low, and I'm playing with too many crappy 1-drops to make Collected Company valuable. Pick your poison. This is a very strong, powerful card. I am not playing it right now because I think the decks you would bring it in against are too situational. It's got upsides. You can make your opponent sacrifice a creature with flying. So you can get, Ledger Shredder. You can get, the bird. You can get Slickshot Showdown. But the problem is, what if they plot the Slickshot Showdown? And then they go in for a ton of damage on the following turn. Pick Your Poison not going to help you there. What if they don't even draw the Slick Shot and you're up against a bad matchup and this thing's stuck in your hand? That's even worse. I actually think Pick Your Poison might actually be more playable versus Prowess than I think, because with that Kazuo thing, Kakazan or something like that. What is it called? Yeah, Kakazan. You can hit the Kumano Faces of Kakazan enchantment. Against red green, you can hit Audacity, but then they draw a card off of Audacity. I think it's awkward, and the fact that its sorcery speed is super awkward. I don't think any deck that you bring this in against has enough targets for it. And also, I'm just squeezed on sideboard slots. If you're gonna use this to play Beat a Shredder, I think the frog effects are just better. I'd prefer to stick with the frog effects, because these are all effective versus mono black. This is a gamble versus the black decks. You want to bring that in versus Rakdos Vampires? Okay, what if they never play Vein Ripper? And you're in one of those matchups where each card matters. You're just basically down a card. You have nothing else to nail with this thing. And people say, well, you can have Fable the Mirror Breaker. Not really. They got the token, they got the 2/2 Goblin out of it. So basically they're still up cards. So all the cards in my deck, there's a lot of Pick Your Poison situations. You could play it and hit Audacity, but the problem is you're turning a losing situation. You're turning instead of badly losing, you're still losing anyway. This is the way I'm describing it. Whereas the deck that I've built with Sentinel in Nameless City, Commander Tyrant of Vraska, and the Copter and everything, every single one of these cards will help bring you back from losing to even. And if you're even, you'll go from even to winning. That is the point of this. That's the point of every single card that I play. Witness Protection, no matter what black mid-range creature is out there, it's going to nail it, and it's going to hit them super hard. So that's a problem with Pick Your Poison, is that it's a lot of the situations people want to play it in. Your opponent's going to get value out of it anyway. A lot of people say, it's good versus Ensouled. No, it's not. Like, okay, you can name the enchantment, but like, let's say they have Copter out. Like, anyway, naming the enchantment isn't even that big of a deal. Okay, so okay, you hit their enchantment. What if they have Copter out? What are you gonna do? You're gonna name Artifact? They've got Artifact lands. They got random blood tokens on the battlefield. You can't even make them sacrifice a flyer because it's only active on their turn. So I think the card is just a little clunky. Right now, the way I understand the card, is there a world where it can be playable? Absolutely, it's a very good card, but that's why I'm not playing it right now. Giganta. I played with this card a lot. I honestly can't say it really did much for me. I would probably play it if my deck would allow it. I'm playing with Tidebinder Mage and Brazen Bar right now. I honestly don't feel like it's gone. I sort of like having the extra sideboard card. This was so useless for me. Like it did things, I guess. Like its best thing to do is you put it back, you put it in your hand to, I don't know, shred it to your Copter. You just toss it to Copter or whatever. So that's the best it can that's the best you can hope for with that card. Okay, let's talk about matchups. Let's talk about matchups. So full disclaimer, this is basically my win rate with the this style of deck. Regular win percentage are leagues, competitive win percentage are the challenges. I've only played 2 challenges. One I went 3-3. The other one I went 5-3 after making top 8. So like this is basically the matchups, and I could easily say that we have a really good mid-range matchup. Look, Rakdos Vampires, Rakdos mid-range, Waste Not. I once lost to Golgari mid-range because of the Cauldron. That's when I had Cauldron in my deck. And so Cauldron I guess the Soul Cauldron single-handedly made me lose that matchup. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure I was going to win it if that card was just any other random creature. Mono black mid-range. Niv to Light, like super undefeated. I've played like a lot more Pioneer matchups before this, but this is, once I settled down on a 75 that I felt was pretty consistent, because I was wildly changing the cards a lot to get to something. This is when I started. But I was crushing the black mid-range decks and Niv to Light even before that. Now, I was also like super losing to Izzet Phoenix. I might have been like 0-12, but things started turning around just a little while ago. I got like 2 wins under my belt over my last 3 matches. I have 2 wins, 1 loss. So maybe my sideboard plans have been working, and maybe my adjustments to the deck have been working. My Red Plus, I've always been losing. There's 4 losses here. It's probably way deeper than that. Same thing with Gruul Prowess. It's basically the same thing. Boros Heroic is probably in the same route because any slick shot deck is just pretty crappy. Amalia is relatively even. Surprisingly, the games sort of feel balanced. It depends on what either side draws. If you have a Torp Orb and Mistcallers, you're probably in good shape. If you don't have any of that stuff and they just put the combo on the battlefield from their hand, you're probably not doing in great shape. Quintorius combo, probably a good matchup. Like, I've been winning. I don't think I deserve to win that much. Lotus Field is an incredibly good matchup. I just haven't played it recently. Blue Control is a very good matchup. Any control matchup is a good matchup. I have no idea versus Blue Spirits. They have flyers. They can sort of block you on the ground. They might have the advantage. I'm not sure. Because, like, Tashana, Sentinel of the Nameless City, not very good versus blocking spirits. Humans, I think, is a good matchup. I think Convoke is a good matchup. Nykthos, I don't know. We have good hands. They have good hands. Like, if you're on I would say their best hands beat our best hands, but I think our worst hands beat their. I think our worst hands beat their worst hands. Like if they're on the play, they go turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2 Kiora, turn 3 what's it called? Then turn 3 they have Nykthos, and I don't know about Nykthos on turn 3. But, yeah, like Nykthos on turn 3 or turn 4, and they overwhelm us. Like, there's just not much we can do. We do have interaction versus them, and we're on the play. We have a lot more game, but, so anyway, I'm not sure about this matchup yet. Soul, I think, is a good matchup. I have 1 recent loss, but in the past, I just smashed the hell out of this deck. Don't know, this Jund Aggro thing. This is all just basically brews at the bottom. Okay, so I'll go quickly, maybe. So anyway, this is my win rate, but let's now go over... Maybe go over some of the matchups. So what you want to be doing here. So against Izzet Phoenix, you... what do I have to do here? There we go. That works out. versus Izzet Phoenix, the main problem is Ledger Shredder. That is the hardest card in the matchup to beat. You have to beat the Ledger Shredder pretty badly. And by that, you have to put Witness Protection, or what's it called? Witness Protection or a frog. You put a frog effect on it. And like, this is your biggest problem, because on turn 2 it's already blocking you, and you never have an opportunity to attack. And by like the next turn, now it becomes a 2/4, then it becomes a 3/5. You never have a good opportunity to attack into the stupid thing, and it's looting at the same time. It's digging deeper into the opponent's deck, and eventually they set up a situation where, oh, 2 Phoenixes in the graveyard, bring them back, attack for 6 in the air, and we still don't have good attacks, but then they can like swing for lethal on a critical turn. So most important thing is to keep this thing locked down. I don't have Unlicensed Hearse in my deck right now, but I never felt like I always drew it and I still lost. So I got the impression that Unlicensed Hearse sort of sucks. So anyway, I'm not playing with it right now in my deck. It's like, you can play with it if you think you have like a better backup strategy, but like I take a turn off, and I don't really slow their game plan down. Like, okay, Phoenix can't be dumpstered, but they just hard cast it. And you could say, well, Treasure Cruise is poorer, but not really. Like, they get to 4 mana. Like, there's a point where they go like Picklock Prankster at end of turn, then they untap with 5 mana, and they Treasure Cruise anyway. So like, if you slow yourself down with the Unlicensed Hearse, and they just catch up anyway, given the fact that you burned a turn doing that. That is very important. Lightning Axe is the only thing that can kill Commander Tyrant of Vraska or Sentinel of the Nameless City. Fiery Impulse is not going to get it done. Also Brotherhood End, also not going to get it done. Same thing with Brotherhood End to eat up, what's it called? Anger of the Gods. So being at 4 toughness is helps you a lot in that matchup. Rakdos Vampires, great matchup. I mean, it's going to be a slugfest. I don't think cracking your Mistcaller for the Sorin is very good, but that's okay. Sorin usually just doesn't have a whole lot to do. In my opinion, like, if they get Vein Ripper in play, I don't care. I just put a frog effect on it, whatever. I lose a creature. Like, they get value, but everything else dies afterwards. I think our deck just outclasses this thing by a huge mile. What to say? Like, yeah, this is the reason you have the frog effect. So to make sure Bloodtithe Harvester doesn't get to eat up your best creature on the battlefield. This guy's a gigantic roadblock. Like, Preacher of the Schism. There's a lot of Merfolk players that probably could never beat this card. They just cannot beat a 2/4 Death Toucher that's on the battlefield. And that's why we got the frog effect. So you turn into a 1/1 frog, and that's not a problem anymore. Same thing with Kalidas, Shieldred. Shieldred, I don't think Merfolk could beat this card. So the biggest problem for the Merfolk decks is that, like, once any of these bombs hit the battlefield, they were just dead. They were just dead. They couldn't really actually interact with the deck. And that would buy the black deck so much time to get back in the game. Not to mention, some of these have lifelink. This has lifelink. This gains you life. This gains you life when stuff dies. So like, the game just completely slips out of your hand. But you just need frog effects and it's over. Niv to Light. Oh, also another thing. Okay, I have to mention, starting here with Rakdos Vampires, Copter is very good in the matchup. So if your opponent very early on in the game, so I love turn 2 Copter, and then I'd be ready to attack by next turn. But if by next turn they got like a bunch of mana up for like their Bitter Triumph, I will not attack. I will not attack with my Copter. I'll just attack with whatever I have on the ground. Do not lose your Copter for nothing. All right, they got a lot of things to do for 2 mana. They can Thoughtseize you again. They could Duress. They can play their own Copter. They can play Bloodtithe Harvester. If they're passing with 2 or 3 mana up, all right, alarm bell should go off. Do not attack with your Copter. I'll only attack with my Copter if they only have 1 mana up. That is where I will be comfortable. Actually, but look at it, they don't even have that much removal. They got Thoughtseize, Duress, and Fatal Push. There's really not a whole lot of removal here. Oh, Sorin deals 3 damage to things, but it won't kill, what's it called? Will not kill Sentinel or your it won't kill your Copter either, because your Copter is not even a creature on your opponent's turn. So I just want to say that, because that's also important in Niv to Light. So by turn 2, they'll have Lightning Helix up. I do not want to attack into a Lightning Helix, not that easily. You can if you have Hexcatcher, and you can sack a creature to protect yourself versus Lightning Helix. Another thing is Deafening Clarion. Deafening Clarion is their sweeper of choice. Outside of, yeah, they don't have Supreme Verdict. I don't know what the reason for that is. Maybe it's just too clunky in this metagame. Yeah, maybe they just don't like Supreme Verdict. There's no Verdict in this deck. I guess the idea is they want to play their creatures and then play a sweeper that doesn't kill their creatures at the same time. I guess that's the mentality. So Lightning Helix, you have to keep your guard up for Lightning Helix. Don't let your creatures die, or don't let your good creatures die to this thing. What else? And especially against a deck like this that is going to try to sweep the board with what is called Deafening Clarion. I will try to put out as many creatures as possible while always keeping in mind, all right, how many creatures am I going to lose to Deafening Clarion? So, you know, I might start off the game with Snowtail Scout, then I play Arcopter, then I play, like, maybe Commander Tyrant of Vraska or Sentinel of the Nameless City, and then I have the option to put 2 drops or 1 drops in play, but maybe I'll be like, do you know what? I have enough stuff in play. I'm going to play like Deep-Root Pilgrimage, or I'm going to play another Sentinel, because this card is not going to sweep the board, and I think that's just very, very, very important. So and then when they do play Deafening Clarion, they kill like 1 drop, which is terrible value, and you just put another 1 drop on the battlefield. So the Mono Black discard is in the same vein. Yeah, these Mono Red aggro decks. So we're losing right now. Plans can change, all right? My sideboard plans can change. My strategy can change. We can figure this out. They got a lot of... This Pyromancer is not stock. Slickshot Showdown, Soulscar Mage, Monster Swiftspear, get to Lava Runner, and this Commando card. Basically, they have 20 creatures. They actually don't have that much burn. Wizard's Lightning, Skewer, and Play with Fire is it. So basically, our creatures are more likely to stick to the battlefield. I should keep that in mind. And they depend on Monstrous Rage to push through damage. So I want to play a little bit more instant speed, but I'm not sure yet. That's why we got the Brazen Borrower. But that's totally up in the air. Remember, they got Rending Volley coming in from the sideboard. Anything else I want to say? Anything important? Combo, Nykthos. Those are the most those are the super big matchups. Abzan, Amalia combo. Yeah, try to stick a Mistcaller early and then ride it to victory. Ideally have the, what's it called, Commander Tyrant of Vraska and Deeper Pilgrimage combo on the battlefield. You can create a bunch of tokens and overwhelm them. What else do I want to say about this? Torpor Orb, of course, huge bombshell in this matchup. I wouldn't bring in Tidebinder Mage. Obviously, they don't have like that many green creatures. Tapping this down doesn't really do anything. Doesn't remove the abilities or anything. Same thing with Dina. So that's not worth bringing in. Are there any critical things to talk about? If they have Deep Cavern Bat and they've got Amalia on the battlefield, probably you should not attack with your Copter. You should keep it on defense to prevent the Deep Cavern Bat from attacking multiple times. I used to think drawing a card with Copter was more valuable than letting our opponent attack, but actually it's not worth it at all. They're gaining life. They scry. It's a complete beating. So yeah, don't let that happen with Adina. And I think that's it. I think that's everything I can tell you about this deck. Everything I've learned. That's everything I can spill onto all of you. So I hope you can innovate and get on top of this. I'm pretty sold on how I play this deck right now. Some matchups are super, super strong. We have a lot of really super strong matchups. Of course, we have some weak matchups, but it's on the way. We're on the board. It's a winning deck. It can top 8 a Pioneer Challenge. It can top 8 anything as far as I'm concerned. And it's not nothing, all right? It's at least, it's not tier 4 like Goldfish says. It's at least tier 2. But yet, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. It's a tough deck to play, all right? It's hard. It is still super hard, just like in Modern. Like, this is not like, oh, you play creatures and you attack. Oh, man, I should have said that. Like, the biggest mistake I always watch people play in Pioneer, both online and in paper, is they just throw the Hex Catcher out there. Like, you can't do that. I feel so bad that this is at the super end of the video. Like, you gotta be patient here. Do not expose your Hex Catcher. But anyway, that's why I'm making a lot of gameplay videos, so I can teach you all the ropes. All right? I got a sideboard guide to this deck in the description, like, there's probably going to be a pinned comment or something. So if you want my sideboard guide, how I do things now, how we swing with this deck, you got it available over there. Anything else to say? I got nothing else. If you have any other questions, I'll answer in the comment section. This has been Nikachu, Merfolk Master, moving to Pioneer Merfolk and making it winning.